The Armed Forces Bowl pitted the nation's leading rushing attack against the nation's leading rusher, and the battle lived up to the hype on Saturday afternoon in Fort Worth. San Diego State tailback Rashad Penny set the single-season school record for rushing yards, but his Aztecs were a bit worn down on defense as Army's triple-option attack kept pace to keep things locked at 21-all going into halftime. Penny's second run from scrimmage saw him go nearly untouched 81 yards to the end zone, leaving a trail of Black Knights defenders in his wake. He added another two-count run from 32 yards out to start the second quarter and break the school record of his good friend and current Philadelphia Eagles running back Donald Pumphrey held. If there was one major negative after the first half for the SDSU offense outside of Penny, it was the fact that they didn't spend hardly any time on the field with the quick scoring drives, and senior offensive lineman Antonio Rosales was ejected after receiving 2 personal fouls on one play. Not to be left out of the party, Penny's backup looked pretty good himself, as Juwan Washington looked more than capable of taking over the workload next year with a 78-yard kick return two-count right before halftime to keep things knotted up going into the break. Army never seemed to panic despite giving up some early scores, as level-headed quarterback Ahmad Bradshaw looked superb running the option attack and racked up 83 yards rushing in a two-count through 2 quarters. As expected, he didn't pass the ball at all for Army, but did have some terrific pitches to his running backs. Andy Davidson punched in a TD to go with his 60 yards on the ground, and Darnell Woolfolk chipped in with 42 yards and a score as well. This was one of the better bowl matchups of the week, and that rang very true early on in this one. Both teams have their work cut out for them in terms of stopping the run in the second half, but it should make for a thrilling finish if those first 2 quarters were any indication. On paper, the Dollar General Bowl between MAC champion Toledo and perennial Sun Belt power Appalachian State shaped up to be one of the best matchups of the postseason. Games are not played on paper, and that certainly played out down in Mobile, Alabama, as the Mountaineers routed the Rockets 34-0 on Saturday night to cap off another season with at least 9 wins for head coach Scott Satterfield. It was quickly apparent that this wasn't Toledo's night early and often. Despite entering the week with an offense that was in the top in the country in terms of scoring, the team couldn't do much of anything on that side of the ball and recorded 4 3-and-outs. Record-setting quarterback Logan Woodside never could find much down the field and was pressure on nearly every dropback, throwing for only 124 yards while also tossing 3 interceptions. Running back Terry Swanson managed 44 hard-fought yards on the ground, but didn't see many carries down the stretch as the team fell further and further behind. While not much was working for the visitors from the north, few things could go wrong for App State. Taking advantage of several short fields, the run game didn't need much to get going, in tailbacks Jalen Moore 125 yards, 3 TDs, and Detrick Harrington 72 yards both made quick work of the MAC holders. Quarterback Taylor Lamb closed out his career with the Mountaineers with a performance that may not have been statically stellar: 8 completions, 131 yards, no 2 counts, but was nevertheless plenty in a game the team controlled from pretty much the opening kickoff. While all those points were nice to have, they didn't really need all of them given how well the Sun Belt's top defense looked to stymie their opponents. Linebacker Anthony Flory was all over the place, hauling in a pick and recording 8 tackles on the night as they held the most dangerous MAC offense to under 200 yards. That gave the team yet another finishing kick as they won their 4th in a row to close out 2017 and enter with plenty of momentum heading to next season. The same could not be said for the Rockets, which still captured an elusive conference yield this year but simply didn't show up in the Dollar General Bowl and looked out of sorts from start. When Fun Belt meets Maction, you throw out the records. That is especially true on Saturday night at the Dollar General Bowl. Appalachian State looked like they were the 11-win team and conference champion in the game, rolling to a 20-0 halftime lead over Toledo thanks to some timely turnovers and the hard-nosed running of their star tailback. Junior Jalen Moore picked up where he left off at the end of the regular season by fighting for 74 yards and a pair of 2 counts on 15 touches, grinding out carries against a loaded front and finding some rhythm as the game went on. That took the pressure off quarterback Taylor Lamb, who was just 4 of 8 for 61 yards but seemed fairly content to just hand the ball off, especially with backup Detrick Harrington also running for 80 yards in the half on just 7 carries. The Mountaineers' defense played their role in the big lead too, forcing a pair of turnovers that gave the team 2 short fields and generally limiting the high-powered Rockets' offense to one of their worst performances of the year. Record-setting quarterback Logan Woodside managed only 76 yards and an interception but did seem to pick things up as the clock wound down in the second quarter. Running back Terry Swanson didn't have any sort of lane to run through however and actually did well in recording 12 yards on the ground given that he was hit in the backfield or at the line on just about every carry. Well, things didn't quite unfold how many expected early in the game. Toledo is still plenty capable of putting up some points in a hurry, so this one is by no means locked up for App State. This was one of the better matchups of bowl season and that will be put to the test if things get interesting after the two teams emerge from the locker room. Add another player to the list who appears to be skipping out on a bowl game to move on to the NFL. According to 247 Sports Bruin Report Online, UCLA quarterback Josh Rosen is going to sit out next week's Cactus Bowl against Kansas State and is expected to declare for the 2018 NFL Draft at some point in the near future. The junior will finish the season with 3,756 yards passing, 26 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions, ranking third in the country in passing yards per game as the heart of the Bruins' offense. Those numbers would have been even better had he not continually dealt with injuries again, suffering some concussion-like symptoms that kept him out of a game against Utah and limiting him at other times in 2017. He had one of his best games of the season against rival USC last month but was injured in the home finale at the Rose Bowl and sat out most of the second half against Cal. As a former five-star recruit who has generated a number of off-the-field headlines at UCLA, Rosen will leave Westwood with a bit of a mixed legacy. While he is undeniably talented and may be the first signal caller taken in the draft next year, the high-water mark in terms of wins with him under center was an 8-5 freshman campaign and he's missed several games in subsequent seasons. A lot of those struggles have something to do with the team around him and why head coach Jim Mora was replaced by Chip Kelly earlier this month. Still, when he was in the Powder Blues there were few college quarterbacks better than Rosen was throwing the football and he'll likely be one of the most debated prospects at the position in the coming months by scouts and coaches as a result. Army's triple option isn't exactly a 2-minute offense. But give them 5 and they're golden. The Black Knights gutted out a game-winning touchdown in the final few seconds and grabbed a late defensive score for good measure to spoil a record-setting day for San Diego State tailback Rashad Penny and claim victory in the Armed Forces Bowl 42-35. Penny, who led FBS in rushing yards and all-purpose yardage, once again showed why he should have been invited to New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony earlier in the month. He tied a FBS record with 200 yards rushing for a fifth straight game, and needed only 10 carries to hit the mark to boot. All told, this senior finished with 221 yards on just 14 carries while recording 4 touchdowns on the day, including the first points of the game on his second carry as he scampered 81 yards untouched to the end zone. The star running back also set the Aztecs' single-season school rushing record when he scored a 31-yard touchdown early in the second quarter, breaking the mark set by last season's leading rusher and his good friend, Donald Pumphrey. Even with Penny's heroics, the game was a close, hard-fought game as you would expect between two teams that each won at least 9 games in the regular season. The Black Knights held the ball for an even 46 minutes in the game as that option offense churned out yards and long drives aplenty. Quarterback Ahmad Bradshaw, somewhat surprisingly, completed a pass for 6 yards but did most of his damage on the ground to the tune of 180 yards rushing and a pair of touchdowns. Crucially, he had several huge pitches to his running backs as Darnell Woolfolk and Andy Davidson combined for 168 yards and 3 scores of their own. While Kel Walker may not have had the stats of his teammates' 5 carries, 37 yards, he did find the end zone on the most important carry of the day when the team went for 2 to give them a 1-point margin with just 18 seconds left on the clock. While SDSU did have a shot at the very end, Elijah Riley ended all hopes of that by emphatically securing the win when he grabbed a lateral on the final play and ran it back 29 yards for the final margin. The victory gives Army a 10-win season for the first time since 1996 and caps a remarkable turnaround run under head coach Jeff Monken. While he probably would have preferred a few defensive stops of Penny to make things more comfortable, gutting out a win in that fashion is just as satisfying as the Black Knights head into the offseason with plenty of momentum.